Hi, Algebra 1 students. It's Mr. Fovel again. I'm here this time to try and give you some explanation on lesson 615, which will help us with our understanding of vertex form. So vertex form is a new form of a quadratic. So far we've learned about standard form on the top here, y equals 2x squared minus 2x minus 4. That equation represents the parabola, the quadratic in the middle here. If you remember, standard form tells us the y-intercept. So notice a -4 here. Ours crosses the y-axis at -4. Then we have factored form that we learned. So the same quadratic in a different form, y equals 2x minus 4, all times x plus 1. And this tells us the x-intercepts. Notice the x plus 1, -1 would create 0 with it. So this is an x-intercept of this second part here. The first part, 2x minus 4, would create 0 using the second x-intercept of 2. So we have 2 times 2 minus 4 would create 0 also. Our third and new form is what is known as vertex form. And it's literally called vertex form because it helps us understand the vertex of a quadratic. So we want to make some connections with it and then make some general understanding on the right here. So the first thing I want you to notice, and the first thing that kind of jumps out to me, is that we have this 0.5 here, and we have this x minus 0.5 here. These two things are connected. What we know is that the x value must make 0. And it makes 0 with the parentheses here. So what we do is we take the part that's a parentheses, x minus 0.5. Notice I don't need the square because our goal is to make 0, and we want it to equal 0. So all we have to do is look for a number that would plug in here to make 0. And we can use some basic algebra, add 0.5 to both sides, and we get x is 0.5, which means that 0.5 minus 0.5 equals 0. Okay, so this tells us our x value. It helps us understand that x value. So now we want to make a connection on where the y value comes from. This -4.5. So to fully understand that, all you have to do is literally plug your 0.5 into this problem. Well, we already know that when we plug it in, we're going to get 0. So this part right here becomes 0. So we're going to square 0 and multiply by 2 while subtracting 4.5. 0 squared is 0 times 2 keeps us with 0 minus 4.5 allows us to get that -4.5, which is the connection here. So we have these two connections between the two. All right, and so that's where vertex form comes from. Notice that the -4.5 is the same as it is here. It's -4.5. They should always agree. They should always be the same. One connection that a lot of people make is we have the 0.5 and we have minus 0.5. They're opposites of each other because they have to create 0. All right, so let's go a little bit further with a skeleton form, no numbers, and see what that does. So we want to figure out the vertex for this. So the way we do that is we want to make this equal 0. Well, what do you plug in for x to make minus h 0? Well, you'd actually do h minus h. That's how we get 0. So the vertex is actually at a value of h, and then by plugging that in, we get 0. 0 times 0 squared would be 0. 0 times a would still be 0. 0 plus k allows us to have a y value of k. So our vertex here is h comma k. Notice the k and the k are the same. The h's are opposites. Here we have a positive, here we have a negative. So they'll always be opposite. Okay, our last thing here is the a value. And a can be positive or it can be negative. And each one tells us a little bit different thing. So we want to look at each. So here we have an a value that's positive, being positive 2. Okay, so that's what we want to focus on, is that positive 2. And if we look at our graph, we're going to see what this tells us. So the first thing that the positive tells us is that our graph opens up. What that means is there's an opening at the top. Okay? It also tells us that at the bottom is the vertex. We'll look at what it's called when the vertex is at the bottom later, but right now, what's important is it opens up and the vertex is at the bottom. Well, I don't have an example of a negative a value, but let's use some common sense to figure this out. So if you remember, positive and negative are opposites of each other. So it would make sense that these would give us opposite things. So a positive gives us something opening up. A negative would give us something that opens down. And if the opening of a quadratic, it would look like this, is down, that means the vertex would be at the top. All right, hopefully this helped you. If you need to, please rewatch the video to get further help, and enjoy.